Okay, I'd like to set a few ground rules so that we understand where we're coming from. This is the organizational improvement plenary session. The PACE Conference Workshop Planning Committee requested that the Strategic Planning Committee attend our PACE conference and present the various models to our audience and so forth. Now, in our booklets, we do have the full models. Because we have approximately 30 plus new PACE chairmen, that the only time they've seen models are when they received our booklet, I have asked that, and then the regional directors asked that, number one, we please explain some of the principles and a little bit of background of why the organizational improvements began and where they were going, etc. And then synopsize the various models that are out there. I'm hoping that this will take less than 20 minutes. Okay? At that point in time, it will become a New England Town Hall meeting, the same style that we use for the issue format. The ground rules here is that these are invited PACE guests, and I believe that we are professionals. The issues on what we're facing is the process that is being undertaken, and etc. So I will not accept any verbal abuse. You will be gonged. We'll get Mike and a few other people will drag you off the floor if we have to. However, okay, all that set aside, it is the New England Town Hall. We would like you to go to a microphone. We have 3 of them. Get in line with your question. Ask your question. We would like you to be very quick about it. We think 1 minute to ask the question is ample time. We will give a panelist 2 minutes to respond. My timekeeper, as you know, Dan Jackson, is over there with the bell, and he will be keeping track. There is a slight change. If the response is not the total explanation, or if the person that asked the question feels he needs clarification or amplification, he may do so. This now allows for another 2-minute response. Now, from there on, it goes to somebody else. So I'm just going to go A, B, C, A, B, C. Okay? You line up at the microphones accordingly. The ground rules haven't been read. Let me go ahead and start with Fernando, please.
Thank you, Charles. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm very happy to be here in the PACE conference. This is my 3rd conference I attended, although not being from the US. First one was in Philadelphia, quite different from here. And it was a pleasure for us from the SPC to have been invited by Charles to attend here and try to interact with you, explain some of the facts, and primarily get feedback from you on what should be done. We knew when we started this task, and we were assigned by the board of directors to take care of this task, that was almost an impossible mission. It's very difficult to get people to change their own system. We know that from the past. We have seen so many companies in the world not being able to adapt to the new times and losing roots. In this country, you have some examples of that. But nevertheless, let me say a few words how this whole thing got started and why. Even though I can recall meetings back to 1990 talking on these issues, that was all in a kind of informal way. The first mark, I would say, for this process started in July 1992 in the retreat we call in Squaw Creek to try to create a strategic plan for the IEEE that never existed before. It was, like all retreats, difficult but successful, and it all ended up by the approval at the end of next year of the IEEE strategic plan, who was a way to foresee how the IEEE should position itself in the next century. Among the 5 goals that it came as the key goals of the strategic plan, one of them was organizational improvement. And see, the words were clearly and carefully chosen. It's organizational improvement, not organizational change. We all know that this should be done day after day, but by some reasons, human beings and primarily engineers, I think, have a tendency not to change too fast. Or organizational issues that we do take much more care of technology and professional issues. So this was assigned to the SPC to develop further what organizational improvement meant. With that in mind, the last year, within the SPC and with the advice of many people, I can tell you that since this thing got started until now, more than 300 volunteers have been involved in the process. So the SPC has been driving the system, but a lot of people have contributed, like here and in some other meetings, even written documents, let's say, as a feedback, which of course the group who has provided feedback to us is much larger. So with that, we put together a set of principles that you can see in the next foil. Those principles that I don't think I'm going to read, you have them there, were approved by the board of directors at the end of that last year. With the approval of these principles, it was also approved a set of design specs. And we were asked by the board of directors in the last meeting of last year to develop a set of recommendations of how to proceed. Needless to say that when you receive this kind of request, you start thinking how to do it. The best way we thought it could be done was to gather around over 100 volunteers, high-level volunteers, in a retreat that was held at the beginning of the year in Marco Island. Based on these design specs, try to give us some light how to proceed. This retreat has some good parts and some bad parts. Some of the groups worked better than others. Some were told things that were not within what we told them they could say. I think they were not allowed to present modifications of the current situation. That was totally against what we convey as messages. But, I mean, probably we make some mistakes using some of the leaders of the groups. But the end result of that was that we had a lot of information provided by these over 105, I think it was 105 volunteers that met there, to develop sets of recommendations to be proposed for the board of directors for approval in order to fulfill our commitment with the organizational improvement. Something I would like to say now is that the only thing organizational improvement is focused on is in the top level structure of the major goals. We are not questioning to all the levels. That would be a major tax, I would say, impossible. A lot of people feel that the top level structure of the IEEE is a little bit heavy, doesn't respond fast enough, doesn't adapt to time. Those are the kind of things we're trying to address. And we may well come to the conclusion that the best thing to do is to leave things like they are. We don't know at this moment. Based on that, I'm going back to the schedule. There were some 7 scenarios developed, 9 scenarios actually developed there. And there had been some work through task forces, task force 1, 2, 3, and 4, to develop these scenarios and presented 3 of them. They just merged in 3 possibilities, a set of recommendations. In a couple of minutes, Henry Bachman will make a summary of those 3 scenarios that you all know were publicized in the Institute. What was that meant for? That was to have some written document to react on all kinds of levels of people. It was widely distributed. We're getting feedback from these scenarios. And I have to say this as a personal statement. It doesn't seem that any of them will have enough support to get passed. There are people, but I don't think we should make the mistake to forget totally what is there. Because there are some features of some of them who may be useful. So with that in mind, in the last meeting of the Organizational Improvement Executive Committee last month, I did put together on the SPC another task force 5 now, chaired by John Snyder, with a mission to come from a different perspective, have a look at the current structure, and see what things need to be changed to improve its efficiency. He's currently working on that, and he will tell us a few more things later. So if you ask me, how do you stand now? I tell you, we don't know. We don't even know if we're going to make any proposal to the board in November. We may come to the December meeting of the board, just telling them, well, we are not ready yet, these are some ideas, we should continue. Although we are committed by the board, by motion that was passed to present something. But we are not going to present something unless we feel it's worth and for the benefit of the IEEE. This is something I would like to assure you, because there have been some kind of misunderstanding that we had already submitted to the board of directors something for approval. No way. Not even in that small committee that we are monitoring this, we have the same opinion, so even we have difference of opinions. So we are just trying to gather information from every source of the IEEE to try to do the best and position the IEEE in the next century in the way it should be. Let me add, I'm in a meeting of the United States Activities Board, and I was remembering yesterday something. When I first get in touch with the United States Activities Board, that was back in 1991, the first year I was Vice President of Technical Activities, I went to Washington and spent a couple of days visiting the office there. By the way, it was the first time a VP TAF ever visited your staff. That was really amazing. Had to be somebody non-US to do it. And there I made a statement, some of you who are here will remember it, which still today I believe the same way. Unless we have a truly strong IEEE-USA, it's going to be impossible to have a strong global IEEE. This is basic for us. Thank you, and now Henry Bachman will introduce the model.
I just want to identify for you some key features and hopefully stimulate the discussion. The important thing about these scenarios is that the concepts have evolved with how to deal with the organization, and getting feedback on these various kinds of concepts will lead us to conclude what is the best overall solution. So let me start. I'll start with the federation model. The federation model concept is based on the fact that we have a federation of geographic and technical entities. That is the key elemental entities of the Institute. It created a Congress, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute, which was consultative, not a policy-making Congress. As in all of the scenarios, we have a reduced size board of directors trying to focus the board on what have always been its objectives of dealing with governance and policy issues, and also a smaller executive committee in this scenario as well, which is focusing on the operational aspects. The key features of this scenario were, first of all, the fact that members have an option to join these technical and geographic entities, and the ones they join are the ones they pay dues or fees to. There is an institute-wide basic fee for core services plus these optional fees. All of the members of the reduced size board, I think there were 21 members in this proposal on the board, all of the members, the voting members, are members at large, which include 12 elected members at large and the three presidents. These technical and geographical entities elect delegates to the Congress. The purpose of the Congress is to nominate candidates for member at large of the board of directors. And the membership, the entire membership then votes for those candidates. There are no other boards other than the board of directors and what in this model we decided to call operational committees, which kind of align themselves with the objectives of the strategic plan. A career enhancement committee, a globalization committee, a products and services committee, and we maintain the standards committee. So that's the federation model. The matrix model, in a sense, added the elements of a matrix structure to something much like the federation model. So there's a lot in common, you see, between these. And this matrix structure affected two aspects of the organization. One, it affected representation on the operational boards, same as the operational committees in the other case. And it also affected the representation on a Congress, which in this case is an assembly. That's the other major difference. The Congress in the matrix model is an assembly, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But you'll see a lot in common between the federation model and the matrix model. That's why I discussed them together. Again, the notion here was core services and fees, which all of the members receive. Now, since this model scenario was created, the group that's been responsible for it has changed this notion of optional fees in the following way. The notion would be that they would freeze all the fees as they now exist for the services that now exist, and that increase in fees could only be based on adding new services, which would be optional. So it's a little wrinkle, but it maintains a lot of the basic fee for service that we now have. Otherwise, as I said, there are geographic and technical entities. The members of these entities elect the assembly, and they do this in a matrix way. Every delegate, the assembly had a shared representation, both technical and geographic. Again, there was a smaller board of directors here of about 21 members, which were elected partially by the assembly and several by each of the largest technical and geographic entities. So it was not a complete at-large board of directors, and which is what's noted here. And the operational boards, of which in this case there were three: a member and services standards board, membership and services board, and a standards board. And I can't remember the name of the third one, but you can stick it up there. Also had proportional representation based on membership in the entities. Now, the third scenario that we created was intended to be a streamlining of the current organizational structure, although many people haven't seen it that way. But that's what its basic intention was. And Joel will tell you about how we're trying to address that in a minute. But basically it was intended to be evolutionary, as I said, streamlining, keep the best features of the current structure, no major changes to societies and sections, again try to emphasize decentralization and autonomy, which is an aspect of all of these scenarios. The key features of this scenario were, first of all, a reduction in the number of boards. There's now the board of directors, which is, by the way, downsized, again, 20-odd members, and then 3 boards reporting to the board of directors. There was a technical operations board, a geographical operations board, and a member services board. Again, the principal geographic and technical emphasis in constituent members, and an opportunity to bring a lot of the support functions that operate within the institute, which don't have any advocacy, into a board which reported to the board of directors and got it closer to the policymaking group in the institute. So those are the key features of the traditional model. And that's all I'm going to say about the models for now, so we give you plenty of time to ask questions. I hope I just jogged your minds enough so you can think of what it is you'd like to know more about. And now I'll turn it over to Joe to tell you about our latest endeavor.
Thank you, Henry. As we said before, it became very obvious fairly quickly that the three scenarios do a lot of comment and possibly some misunderstanding, and definitely were not the last word. I was asked by Fernando to take a look at a possibility of moving forward in small increments towards some undefined goal, doing it in a controlled fashion, allowing ample time throughout the process for constant review, modification, change, redirection, whatever you want to call it, allowing it to be done in a measured way so we have minimum impact, minimum dislocation, maximum improvement. Some of the goals of what we looked at were very simple. State them in a couple of sentences. One, strengthen the USA organization. That's this group. Two, maintain and improve professional activities. Again, our area of interest and concern. Three, nothing that we do ever, regardless of what anybody may think, is really and truly cast in concrete. We may change a bylaw, modify a constitution, but all of these have to be dynamic, changing as time progresses, keeping us abreast of developments in technology, developments in our society, developments in our globe, so that we can truly keep up to date and stay vital and vibrant. So nothing is ever cast in concrete, although we may think it is. It may be slightly difficult to change once people start to move forward, but change is always possible. And I think that Fernando said it very well, that a global IEEE must have a strong IEEE USA. That, I think it puts it very succinctly. When he asked me to chair this task force, the members of the task force were at that time were appointed, and it's a very august group. I shouldn't say august in this time of year, maybe a September group. That's a bad joke, I know that. Thanks. I was, of course, asked to chair the group. I made the mistake, by the way, at one point of an SPC meeting of standing up and making a comment, and the next thing I knew, I was appointed to chair a committee. And that's, I guess, the way the IEEE works. And the signed, use the word assigned, because nobody really volunteered them to this committee, was Troy Nagel, who's not here today, who is our past president. Henry Bachman, who is here today, another past president. Martha Sloan, who's here today, another past president. And then three currently sitting directors, Ross Anderson, here from Region 5, Fred Andrews I mentioned already. Paul Chung, I didn't mention Fred, thank you. Paul Chung, who's director for Region 10, and John Ackenhusen, where are you, John? Sitting over here. These are both John and Ross, of course, are on USAB. And then Fred Andrews, who is the vice chair of the SPC committee, was joined to fill it out as a voice of wisdom and moderation. We have had several conversations. In trying to execute my assignment, I sent out email messages and some phone calls to every one of the vice presidents, other than myself, of course. It's writing to myself, I know I won't answer it. And I've gotten answers from a couple of them. A couple of boards that I spoke to, they are in the process of drafting some statements as to what their positions are in the existing scenarios and what their comments were. And specifically, I asked them to be creative and to think about incremental steps. And then over the last few days, we've sat here as a group, unfortunately taking me and others away from some of our very important sessions here, but this is a very important topic. We had rump sessions, if you will, though I don't like to use that word. Here, starting yesterday morning at 7:30 in the morning for a quick breakfast as we sat and talked, and right through to just before this lunch. We came up with a couple of thoughts. I'd like to present these to you now. First of all, what is the ultimate structure, or what could it be? You can't design increments to move forward without some thought as to where they might go. Thought was, what are the major thrusts of the IEEE? We have a very strong and vibrant technical arm. We have a very strong non-technical or geographic delivery arm, which concerns itself with many other things that are not necessarily technical in nature. Recognizing those two arms, what happens if in the future we have two vertical columns, one called technical, one called non-technical / geographic, if you will. And within these, we place various things. For example, in the technical arm, we would place the technical societies, councils, and other things that are done in the current technical activities board. In the non-technical / geographic arm, we would place the sections, the chapters, the student branches, and the various national societies that we currently have arrangements with. And this would include IEEE Canada, which happens to be Region 7. They have a separate organization now called IEEE Canada. It would include IEEE-USA. It would include any other grouping, might be an IEEE Asia, might be an IEEE South America, or etc. But any national boundary organization which wants to do professional type activities, in other words, non-technical activities, non-specific activities. These would become under that one umbrella. And the IEEE-USA would be a major entity within that umbrella. The other institute activities would be considered to be operational, for example, possibly standards, possibly publications, possibly the educational activities could be considered as operations efforts. Now, all of these activities would have to be, if you will, operated under the direction of a general policy-making body. Policy-making body would be the highest level body of the institute. And the general feeling is this might be composed of a elected president, which is basically a member at large, plus other members at large. Again, not defining at this point by any stretch of the imagination what this might look like in detail, but saying that this is a group elected by the members of the world. Not the United States, they can do this separately. The United States people will elect members of IEEE-USA, not for the overall body. The general organization, though, that we're talking about here is very nebulous. It doesn't define a lot of things. And we're saying at the moment, let's let the technical operations define its structure. Let's let the geographic and non-technical operations define its own structure, how it wishes to organize itself, how it wishes to proceed and do things. All of this obviously tied together by the policy-making body. Now, what can be done in the interim that leads us eventually toward this very different goal, but again, one which is a potentially possible goal, and doesn't vary that much greatly from what we saw on the screen a moment ago. Well, we could take an initial step forward, pause, look at the results of that step, and say, are we heading in the right direction? Then take another step based upon the results of the first one. And one of the steps we talked about as a potential first step is to form and officially form an IEEE-USA. Make it a real entity. And let it have an elected president. And the elected president-elect. Possibly even an elected secretary-treasurer. And considering that the structure of the USAT includes 6 U.S. regional directors, leave that as is, no change. It includes 3 representatives selected from the Technical Activities Board, 3 divisional directors, leave that as is, no change. It includes the councils, which are selected by USAT, the chairs of the councils, no change. It includes some members at large, possibly change those and make those electable by the United States Region 1 through 6 members. Now, the board of directors remains essentially unchanged. The 6 regional directors who sit on USAT will still sit on the board. the 3 technical directors who sit on USAB will still sit on the board. The president of IEEE-USA will sit on the board and the executive committee, and we will probably, one of the thoughts, and this is, again, it's wide open, this is brand new, one of the thoughts is that let's appoint the IEEE-USA president as the vice president for professional activities. Again, it's minimum change, but it brings the concept of a president there. Another thought we had, by the way, was, gee, let's change that a little bit. Maybe we can do away with the position, IEEE, Vice President of Professional Activities, and maybe we can instead say, if the organization you represent has 100,000 members, USA does, we have approximately almost 200,000, then you automatically have a seat on the executive committee. And similarly, if an organization has 25,000 members, we might give them a seat on the board of directors if they don't already have one. Now, some of our societies, for example, the Computer Society has about 70,000 members. They have 2 seats in the board of directors. There are 2 divisional directors from the Computer Society. So although they have 70,000 members, that would not give them additional seats in the board. They already have the seats, so they could not be replacing it. A new society, such as, for example, if the IEEE Belgium were to be formed, and that had 25,000 members, we know it doesn't, conceivably they could have a seat on the board as a potential system. Now, this is not casting any of this in concrete. By the way, you'll notice I haven't mentioned anything about finances. I haven't said the magic dollar word. I'll say it right now. The magic dollar word is that on this incremental change, there is no change to the way the dues are collected or paid. And the way USAB, IEEE-USA, or the Educational Activities Board, or Regional Activities Board, or TAB, or anybody else, there's no change to the way they're funded. But what this does is gives us a chance to move into a somewhat more autonomous IEEE-USA, see how it relates to the board, how it relates in terms of its new functionalities, and see what other changes can be made a year later, or a year and a half later, or 2 years later, to begin to move us toward some other picture. And it allows us to begin to, in-depth, explore this ultimate picture, which I just outlined as one more potential picture, and see where we want to go. So this is what I'm throwing out here on the table for comment, and I'm going to ask anybody who has comments, of course, to ask questions now, but more importantly, we have an email address, OI, for Organizational Improvement, .reply, R-E-P-L-Y, at IEEE.org. You say OI, Organizational Improvement, what it stands for, OI, reply, R-E-P-L-Y, at IEEE.org. You send an email message today with comments, suggestions, criticisms, helpful criticisms, whatever. It will not only reach us through the staff, but it will also go on to a information file so you can automatically retrieve these, all the comments, and anybody can find out what people are saying and how they're commenting. And more importantly, our task force will receive, each one of us on the task force will receive copies of all the comments we send in. And our staff, and we shine here in particular, will be summarizing these comments and preparing the executive summary so our staff can be, so our committee can begin to analyze these and take them in. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to present this rough cut. It's a new committee, and it's a toughie. Thank you.
Before we start, there was a request on the part of each of your regional directors also that they be CC'd on anything you send to oi.reply@IEEE.org.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, this is now time for the New England Style Townhouse meeting, and I see Dan Jackson is already at the mic. Dan ran up there because he's my timer, but in this case he gets timed. Dan, please.
I'm Dan Jackson, past Region 3 Director, and I have lost confidence in the committee to hear the comments. They listen, but they don't hear the comments of the members. Over 60 days ago, it was indicated that the pages of the Federation and Matrix models were mislabeled. This is confusing and misleading in trying to refer to parts of the descriptions. If the committee cannot hear and correct this error, how can we be assured that they hear other points brought to their attention?
The committee heard, the committee saw, and the committee concluded that it didn't take one more look to see which was the Federation model, which was the matrix model. So in the interest of conserving paper, we didn't change it. We apologize if it's caused confusion.
That's Mike, please.
At this meeting, I mentioned this to somebody else, and it is still unclear when you look beyond the first page of each model and are trying to find which model you're in, that the pages at the top are mislabeled, and therefore it is misleading to people trying to find information. And I don't think not correcting it is a proper thing for a typographical and file error.
You're absolutely right, and all you have to remember is the code. That if the top of the page says Federation, it means matrix, and if it says matrix, it means Federation. And what more can I say?
Okay.
And I wasn't responsible for it.
Okay. Second one, Dick Ackley, please.
Dick Ackley, member of the Board of Directors and member of EAB. I would like to ask Joel, in his discussion, I didn't quite catch how EAB would be configured here. I'm very interested in making sure we don't damage EAB, which I think is a very critical function of IEEE.
The functionality of EAB is across the board. It covers both the technical and the non-technical or professional aspects. So EAB is one of those universals that is utilized by both of the two verticals I mentioned, and the current feel is that that would become one of the, actually I mentioned three of them, EAB standards and pubs would be the three that are currently boards but will be grouped under operations and will be in effect reporting directly to the executive committee.
I'm concerned that some of the others fragmented the educational activities, and I don't think we want to fragment this important.
Here, although there will be a single committee, they will be working really in both areas. And it'll be up to that committee and up to staff to make sure that the two areas, technical and professional, geographical, are working together.
Okay, now I'm going to Mike C. Way in the back over there. You got it.
It's Mike C. I didn't think it was
Yeah, you're it.
back, right? Okay. The preliminary comment during the luncheon discussion, I was sorry that Howard Wolfman was not as skilled as Victor Borga at putting in the exclamation points, questions, and things to indicate the degree of emotionalism that was associated with some of those statements. We saw a little bit of that just a few minutes ago. But the comment I wanted to make about what's going on here is probably a meta comment. I did not have the wits to record the exact words and bring them with me, but it was a statement, I will give the attribution later, that just when we thought we were getting along and cooperating and getting some things done, the management would reorganize us, and it would be a wonderful way of distracting people and demoralizing the workers. Now, the interesting thing is that quote goes back to Petronius Arbiter in something like 400 BC, and I think that there's a problem here. Okay.
I don't know what comments. Anybody have comments? I think that was a statement. Okay. Joe Lilly, if you would, please.
Yeah, I'm Joe Lilly, Pace Chairman for Region 5. It seems to me that when we put together a committee, the committee should be charged with coming up with a product. I think that this particular committee has been at work for 2 years now, and we're within 3 months of a deadline, and I don't think they have a product. I think the best they can do is come up with 3 possibilities. It seems to me that if they can't really meet the charge of the Board of Directors and deliver a reorganization product, they ought to get out of the way and let somebody that can handle the job do it.
Let me skip down to this one, and then we'll skip over that way.
Okay, Dick Doyle, Reliability Society President. First, yes, a very august panel, very prized panel here. I'm a little disappointed that we don't have the immediate past president and the president-elect. I don't know if they refused to sit on the panel or if they just couldn't make it. We will assume our own conclusions there. The people have spent a lot of time on this. I agree with that statement. I would like a little help from Henry Bachman if you had to go to the board tomorrow and make the presentation, because a panel is supposed to be converging on a solution, and I don't have the time to dig through the pile to find a diamond. Please tell me what you're going to present. And is it A, B, or C? And give me some help and give me your answers.
I can respond to that. And to the previous one also. By the way, the SPC is not a committee that has been for 2 years. The SPC has stayed for many years in the IEEE. So within its task is taking care of that now. Responding to the last question, what we have is developed some possibilities. Now we're getting feedback from everybody. Based on that feedback, we will decide what to present to the board of directors. And one of the feedback is what we're getting here today. We're going to present something we know is not going to fly. So what I can tell you is before December, we will know what to present. At this moment, none of us know what the presentation is going to be. The 3 proposals is the new one, only the new one, still to be seen.
You are getting feedback. You say, EE Times just covered it, last week, and we covered it in the Spectrum, and I don't believe that you're getting any good feedback other than negative, and I would like to know, are you going with 1, 2, or 3 for your proposal as it stands right now? Now, you made it very clear that you had nothing concrete, but you must be converging. We don't operate in a divergent control system.
Correct, exactly. Task Force 5, the one I just appointed, will be the converging point. It's incremental. I think it is most likely to happen that in the board of directors in December we will present an incremental approach with some target in the future. So whatever comes out from Snyder.
We'll go all the way to the back over there, please. Bob Rivers, your turn. Bob, I'm sorry, you're in the back.
Yeah. Bob Rivers, and I'm a veteran of the 1972 to 1975 Tanner Long Range Planning Committee. So I have some background. And I suggest that the non-traditional models that are suggested here are fundamentally flawed. To the extent that the IEEE is a membership organization, it's not an industrial organization, it's not a political organization, it's a membership organization. And as such, it should do what the members want done. How do you set up an organization that's responsive to the members when there is practically no direct contact between the controlling people in these non-traditional models, between the members and the controlling people, as there is in the traditional model?
Time.
Thank you.
By the 2 non-traditional models, and speaking of the Federation Matrix, in both cases, the members of the entities, the members are the members of the entities, be they geographic or technical, and these members elect the board of directors. These members elect the Congress, which nominates the board of directors in one case. So the intention was to provide a very direct connection between the members and the governing body of the institute. That's why you see so many members at large at the institute.
But there's no direct connection.
Can't hear that microphone. Okay, thank you. We'll go back up to this mic over here in front.
Kay Bollinger, Pace Chair, Fort Wayne, Indiana section. First, I just want to thank the committee for doing a thankless job. And
good way to start.
and, no, but please forgive me because this is my first attendance at a PACE conference, and I'm a little unclear as to the history. Could you just explain briefly? The board of directors gave you a charter. Was that in response, or gave you a charge? Was that in response to what the committee had already done, or it seems like we've got a reciprocating situation here. And exactly what were you asked or told to do?
Well, dating back to 1992, there was a proposal I made to the executive committee to form an ad hoc group to develop the strategic plan. From that, it was assigned to the SPC. The SPC helped to put together the strategic plan. As a consequence of the existence of the strategic plan, one of the goals, the organizational improvement, was picked up by the board of directors and asked the SPC to deliver some recommendations to fulfill that goal. That's the bottom line of it.
Oh, hold on.
Strategic Planning Committee.
Okay.
The notion was that the president at the time, Troy Nagel, set an objective to address each of the objectives of the strategic plan. And one of the objectives of the strategic plan was organizational improvement. And that's what initiated that. It became a board project which was assigned to the strategic plan.
And it even went on from there. At the June meeting in 1994, there was a workshop to address the situation. The conclusion of the workshop was, yes, there is a need to investigate organizational improvement, to evaluate whether we were in a position to go into the next century. Proceeded from there, came up with, as Fernando had outlined, with a document that set a set of design requirements and specs that the board approved last November. There was a workshop held in January of this year down in Marco Island. There were 100 people from across this broadest spectrum as we could put together of the Institute. We don't have a final plan, as Dick was demanding at this point, because it wasn't part of the process. If we committed sins, one of the sins is going out to get feedback before there was any final thing. The board it even has not said bring them one plan. It allows the possibility that they can be brought a number of different plans that is this committee's best effort to respond to the effort. The board will make the decision. The board, you have a good portion of the board here listening today also.
All the way back to John, please.
I'm John Verhotsky, vice chairman of the Oregon section. After listening to the plans, I'm not aware of a single engineer on the committee. They do not know, I do not see any analysis, I don't see any problem-solving skills. For instance, has the committee ever considered that the board of directors has not been able to give the staff directors appropriate direction? Have they considered that the staff directors have not been giving the staff appropriate direction? There are many reasons why the issues that are listed in the handout could be caused. Others, you aren't identifying the problem. You think a reorganization will solve it, but you have to look at yourself and you have to look at the organization. And chances are, if you work within the existing structure and do an incremental improvement, you can solve it.
Time. Any comment back on that? Oh, well, I'm sorry. I thought you were. Go ahead. You got 10 more seconds, John. All right.
And have you thought about applying some modern management technique and doing some introspection, trying to solve the problems that way instead of reorganization?
Thank you, Jim.
We looked at what were perceived as problems, and not just by the Strategic Planning Committee, and we looked at how organizational improvements could address some of those problems. And that was how, and that was the role of the design teams at Marco Island, to take the design specs, which were derived from principles, which were derived from systemic problems, in that order, and to take those specs and then create an organization that would hopefully meet the principles and solve the problems. Maybe you don't like the result, but that was the process.
But it was specifically not to address the staff. We are working with staff, and it is the new general manager, when we get him in place, the acting general manager at the moment has been working to address problems within the staff. This effort that we're addressing was aimed at the volunteer structure, not the staff structure.
We'll start with A. Start over here.
Okay. Yeah, real quickly. When you talk about reorganization, we typically look at things that address the areas where we think we list the ones that need improvement, and then put in place some way to measure when you finish up with that organization whether it has solved those problems. I haven't seen that in the documentation. Maybe I missed it.
That's not exactly direct response, so I don't want to make that point. We are, for instance, and this is what Fernando is referring to, we are looking at the financial analysis of these scenarios, but we're not going to do that until we are convinced of which ones we're going to bring to the board. And so we're going to analyze them from that viewpoint, and we'll have a metric from that viewpoint as to how they are to perform. In terms of other kinds of metrics, I would have we had criteria to test these. We had criteria to see if these organizational improvements meet the design spec, and that's the kind of metrics we've used so far.
Okay. Start with the back first. Back over here, and then we'll go to Bob Rhodes. Go ahead.
Well, while we do appreciate some of the volunteers trying to get some input, one thing I do have problems with is the amount of time that we were given to try and get input from the members. In order for us to be able to convey what we hear here to the members that we're associated with and be able to get the feedback to you, we need a lot more time than what we're being given by announcing it in June in the Institute with very little information, presenting it here at PACE conference with, again, very little information, but as much as you can do in a short period of time. But we still have the problem of conveying what we've learned here to the members so that they can give input to you. But what we don't appreciate is we just don't have the time to be able to do it. You're taxing us too much.
Let me try to answer that question, or at least address the issues raised. There have been numerous times allowed so far to respond. We are asking for a response now. We're not asking to make a decision in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We have several months yet before we have to speak to the board. We have several meetings of the Strategic Planning Committee before even we're ready, finalizing the thoughts. So today, for example, we proposed a scenario 5. We've also proposed others which have been publicized and are in the book, the handouts for this conference. And there's an opportunity for feedback on any of the 3 scenarios or the new Task Force 5 scenario that I'm working on to the email address I gave earlier. In addition, a survey was passed out earlier. The results will be factored into our thinking, and I'll discuss those a little bit later. We will also be mailing a modification of that survey out to a selected sample of members throughout the world, and we will code it by region so we know where they're coming from, and we will be analyzing those results. So there will be plenty of opportunities yet to go, and I understand and appreciate that your feedback to your sections and to your PACE committees and sections is going to take some time, and we're not asking you to respond tomorrow. We are asking you to respond fairly quickly, but certainly not where it's become an impossible task. We've allowed enough time, I think, to begin to get some good responses back. Plus the fact, of course, it's had several weeks of prior, I hate to use the word exposure, but that's really what it was in EE Times, in IEEE publications. It's been all over. World Wide Web has it also. So it's not as if it's brand new today, but other than this scenario, the Task Force 5. Bob Bruce.
I'm Bob Bruce, Long Island Section USAP Liaison. I'd like to thank the committee for the work they did, and to the pair of ears that I'm holding, the plan just outlined by Joel Snyder sounds closest to the mark. By the way, Long Island Section did respond by publishing a response in our section newsletter, Pulse. The Workforce Committee of USAP, of which I'm a member, also responded to the plans. I have a question about Joel Snyder's plan. The 6 regional directors of the U.S. remain on the board of directors, and they remain in USAP. Does RAB as an entity continue to exist, and will the 6 regional directors in the U.S. be on that entity?
The first iteration, yes, RAB will exist, and there are 10 regional directors who sit on RAB, including the 6 regional from the United States and the other 4. So there will be no change at all in RAB for the first iteration.
Thank you. Now, we have approached where we're at the 2:43. If I have consensus from the regional directors, I think, are we proceeding in a fruitful manner? And let me take consensus, we're willing to go for about another 10 to 15 minutes, or, okay, we'll continue for another 10 minutes. And then
there's a break, so we're only encroaching on the break.
Yeah, we've got a 30-minute break, so we're encroaching on the break. Let us go. But I want to start the regional breakout meetings on time, if at all possible, and give you at least a 15-minute break. Bill Whipke, you're up here.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, you're in, I got to pass the microphone. It came from yours. Back to the back.
This Maynard Morris from Utah. I just asked that you add one thing to this. He's got a lot of detail in here. Could you put something like an advantage or disadvantage of each one of the proposals? It's pretty hard to go down through and compare line by line, kind of like an executive advantage or disadvantage of each proposal. Whatever you come up with.
Okay. There's no feedback coming.
I can try it. That's a very, very difficult task because, let's face it, looking at these scenarios, it doesn't matter which one you're looking at, your personal interpretation, the eye of the beholder, is a key one for generating advantage, disadvantage. They all claim certain advantages, every one of them. And they claim to solve certain problems. The interpretation as to whether or not they solve them. I know my interpretation is different than Tom's, different than Henry's, different than Fernando's for each one of the scenarios. So it's darn difficult to do, but I think we can try it. We can be in a panel to try it. I don't know.
Yeah, we show all the advantages.
At the microphone, we can't hear you. Let me go ahead with Janet, if you would, please.
Janet Rochester, Vice Chairman for the Professional Communication Society. There were originally 7 proposals, 7 scenarios, and these were merged down to 3. From what I've heard, a lot of significant aspects of those 7 proposals were lost in that merger. We're now back up to 5 proposals that we're looking at. Why could we not have looked at all 7 and then made our decision from that? We seem to be having all of this merged together has been done by the committee. The committee could have decided the whole thing in the first place because you've taken a layer of information away from us.
The Strategic Planning Committee nor this Organizational Improvement Committee did the reduction from 7 down to 4. There were task forces put together from the corresponding groups that came up with the original 7 in Marco Island, and they did the reduction down to originally it looked like 4, and then they got so far with 2 of the 4 that they realized that they were pretty close, and they collapsed it down into 3. But this committee is only managing the process. That reduction, if you will, was done by the task forces formed out of the original groups.
There were representatives from each of the 2 task forces that served to combine whichever ones they were into scenario 1, et cetera, et cetera. So remember, we only had so much time at the retreat, and this gave an opportunity after we saw what came out to ask these groups if they could do some consolidation, and they did.
At one stage in the retreat, there was, I think, 14 or 16 different scenarios floating around. Before that 3-day process was up, each of the groups had resolved it down to 1 by a process similar that then was put in place to go from 7 to 4 to 3.
Bill Whipke, please.
Yes, I only have one comment, and it has nothing to do with procedure. It has to do with the fact that I originally joined the International Radio Society, which became the IEEE, an international society. I am not interested in joining an American IEEE. I joined an international society, and if we can't have an international society, I would probably resign.
Remember, one of our strategic visions is a global organization, and I don't think any of the scenarios are intending to change that unless and until that becomes the
Just as a geographical entity within the, if you will, the global IEEE, the IEEE. So, with the objective there to be able to better serve the U.S. member, but at the same time, serving U.S. member means maintaining the global IEEE also.
John?
John Reiner, Region 5, Director-elect. And I've got 3 comments. One is on an evaluation against the design criteria. Having worked on the RAB response, which is still in a draft mode, we felt this was a necessary first step in trying to compare and evaluate the models that we had. And I would encourage that a group from all three of these models take a look at that with some evaluation criteria. Second, the idea of not including or excluding finance from the basic consideration in the formation of these models, particularly with respect to the impact of unbundling dues, was a fatal flaw in my estimation, and would like some comment on that. The third one is with respect to the activity that Joel's working on. When will we see a diagram on that and some more information so we can get feedback on that part of it?
For an answer to that last one, I'm shooting at the moment to have a document available by the end of the month. We have a meeting scheduled the 29th of September. Face-to-face meeting. There will be a couple of telephone conversations, some email going back and forth. Before then, we'll have a face-to-face meeting on the 29th. There's a strategic planning committee meeting on the 30th, and we will at that point, I expect, or I'm shooting for having a document available then.
To answer the second question, we do and have planned, and the staff is preparing to help us with a financial analysis. And we were going to undertake that sooner until we realized that maybe the scenarios we had at the moment would not necessarily be the ones that we were going to go forward with. So we said, let's make sure we know what they are, and then we're going to analyze those. But the staff has been preparing to set up the models by which we're going to do this financial analysis.
Okay, George, please.
I'd like to ask why the
Can't hear it, George.
Can you hear that now?
Yes.
I'd like to ask why the SPC didn't ask the IEEE members in the U.S. to vote on how they wanted IEEE-USA to function in the delivery of services, at least a straw ballot to guide them. Today was the first time I'd heard the news about the financial analysis, and so the other part of that question is, how can you do the financial analysis if you don't know what % of the members are going to elect to become a member of a region or a member of the professional arm of IEEE?
We have a survey which is intended to give us some indication of how members are going to respond to that, and then we'll also have to make some assumptions, like you always do when you try to analyze a problem. We won't hope to know everything, but we're going to make some assumptions, try to make some good assumptions. But the survey is going to give us guidance. And we may even do a sensitivity analysis and say, depending on at what level, and see what that means.
Okay. Jerry Gordon.
Jerry Gordon, Region 2. From the very beginning, I have been very disturbed by the mandate, or almost an obsession, that something has to go back to the board by December. This past June, I was at a board meeting of one of our major societies. I'm not a member of the board, but I am on the committee. 2 days after they received the material, a motion was put before the board to approve one of the plans, and they were discussing it favorably. Someone on the board, who is here in fact, stood up and said, "What are you people doing? We just got it, we don't know anything about it, and we're going to approve it." And the answer was, well, we have to have it back before December, and we don't meet till December. So somehow the leaders will get together and decide what to do. I don't know whether that same thing existed in other societies, but it certainly is not going to get good results back from the society viewpoints, and I think it's a mistake to demand a December reply.
Certainly, we don't mean to short-circuit anything. If a part of the organization isn't having a meeting between now and December, or back in June, December, Jerry, I missed your initial date here. Certainly there is email and other means of doing the communication. The board of directors of the Institute was given the option at their meeting in June, and did pass a motion asking the Strategic Planning Committee to bring forth, if possible, a set of scenarios for their consideration in December. Certainly if this group comes to the conclusion that it is impossible, they'll report that back to the board. no matter what, reporting back to the board. The board is asked that they be presented by the option. The board did not commit to making an absolute decision. They have the option in December of saying, let's go out for more information or whatever their wishes are.
Let's remember that there's another aspect that the board members recognize, and that is their terms are up at the end of December, and they're looking to get this done on their watch, and that's a perfectly legitimate thing for a group to want to do. So that's, I'm certainly, is what's behind some of the board members saying, let's get over it.
Dick Ackley, and then one more question after that. I think we're running out of time. Go ahead.
I introduced myself before, Dick Ackley. I have two concerns that have been brought up here. One is that I had the impression that Joel's new approach was going to be a tweaking. But to me, it looks like all the other ones that have occurred, it looks like it's going to be far more than a tweak, unless I don't define tweak properly. It looks like it's going to be a big change. And so that's one concern. The second concern is that in his answer to Bob Bruce, Joel also said that that this was going to be an interim thing. And I'm concerned about what the final thing is going to be. Is it going to be far more change than we are currently hearing?
Try to answer that one. Before you can tweak anything, you've got to know which direction to tweak it in. So one of the things we've done, and I proposed earlier, was a potential, not a definite, but a potential final or future that far reaches of the universe and the far distant future, a potential future organization of the IEEE. One step to get there, which is a relatively painless step, involves improving the structure of the United States Activities Board and how it relates to the IEEE itself, the Board of Directors, and the Executive Committee. What I have proposed at this meeting was that the tweaking be that one step towards this overall goal, which can vary dramatically over the next year. If we put this into place by the end of '96, a year later, evaluate and maybe put something else into place. Gradual steps.
That I fully approve of.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more question, and then we're going to have one more thing. Joel has the results of the survey that you all filled out yesterday, and he's just going to present that just so that it gives you some feedback as to the way this organization, the PACE people, felt about the questions that were asked. And with that, Peter, please, you'll end it.
Peter Burke Snyder, Fort Huachuca section. The executive committee at Fort Huachuca section took a very careful look at the reorganization, and they asked me to convey the resolve the following. Any reorganization of IEEE that affects IEEE-USA in any way should not be implemented for at least the next 2 years to permit consideration of alternative models.
If there aren't any responses, Joel, if you would, please.
After many hours of tabulating the results and buzzing through each multiple page, you mind the number we had. Here are the results. For the first question, why did you join the IEEE? You'll notice the professional activities, technical activities, career building, and local activities were clear in a way the reason why people join. This is somewhat confusing because many people, myself included, joined before some of these topics even existed. We may have joined for other reasons. In the next go-around, this will be modified slightly. Are you now or have you ever been an active volunteer? The answer here should be a resounding yes. You're all PACE leaders and leaders of some type or other. And the question was where. Most of you are leaders in your sections and regions, some in your society and chapter, and some put yourselves down as professional leaders. Again, that question in this audience is a given. Should the IEEE be a U.S. organization or international organization? And there again, very near numbers. No clear consensus as to predominant one way or the other. Again, close numbers. Should IEEE be organized on the basis of geographic areas or national boundaries? 52 said define geographic, 22 national political, both 47, which again is not too unexpected from this group here. Should each major IEEE group be more financially self-sustaining? The preponderance effectively say yes. 37 are neutral, and if you look at the agrees, it's 45 agree, 37 are neutral, and some of the balance are disagree somewhat. Decision making, should that be delegated downward? And the answer is an overwhelming yes by 77. Roughly a third say keep it as is. Hard to determine that one. Due structure is another toughie. Keep as is, 61. Base amount plus core services, 31. 23 for base amount, period. So again, it's not necessarily a clear picture as to what change is necessary. To keep as is the interesting answer there. Number 8, assuming the fixed amount for dues. Again, this has to do with the apportioning of the dues to support the various activities. Don't favor, 71, overwhelming, compared to 49 in favor. Next page. Board of Directors be composed of members at large, constituent-based, or both. 50% say both, and roughly a quarter say for each side. Again, it's an indication. We're taking this into account in my task force for sure. Number 10, to what extent should IEEE constituent groups be autonomous within the IEEE? Keep as is, 45, and 58 say they can either somewhat or mostly. So again, that's an interesting combination, keeping in mind that right now, how well you know the IEEE, many groups are quite autonomous. 11, professional and technical interests be responsibility of national societies, including the IEEE-USA and IEEE Canada, rather than the IEEE itself. And on that one, 86 major numbers said yes. Number 12, again, if you look at the numbers there, affinity group, keep as is, 57, and 47 say agree that it should be treated as an affinity group. Again, it's an overwhelming number, looking for a special interest group, if you will, or an affinity group within the U.S. And then number 13, should the IEEE provide mechanisms for representing its U.S. members' interests in the government? You can't say I'm too surprised knowing where we are. 128 say yes. That's a slight majority. Finally, if the IEEE-USA became a voluntary national society for U.S. members, is it likely that you would become a member? 90 said yes. 34 said can't say. We did get some interesting comments, handwritten comments to that one. This is the survey. Now, some of these questions we can tell from the answers were slightly confusing. Some were very confusing, possibly. We have modified a few of them. And this survey will be sent out within the next week, I think it is, to a sample of IEEE members worldwide, and we will know by coding which region. We don't know who sends it back, but we'll know which region it came from. So we can obviously not include answers from outside the USA and USA-based questions and things like this. But we will get a feedback from it that way also. Keep in mind, we reiterate again, oi.reply@IEEE.org. Copy to your regional director for all and any comments. Thank you.
Everybody takes off with the consent of the regional directors. We will start in the regional PACE coordinators. We'll start the regional meetings 5 minutes late. That'll give a 20-minute break outside for coffee and drinks. Thank you very much. And thank you, the participants, very much.
Thank you, Charles.